This interview is being conducted for the Ploughing Up Our Past project. My name is Kay McMeekin and the respondent is Morag Gordon. This is the 17th of March 2021 and the interview is taking place via Zoom. Morag, thanks very much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project. Could you please confirm your name?
Morag Gordon.
And your age or your year of birth?
1947.
And for the record, in just a couple of words, what's your connection to farming in Ayrshire?
Well, I was brought up on a farm.
What farm was it?
Avisyard.
Was the family always in farming?
My grandfather went into Avisyard in 1938.
And when you were in Avisyard, were the grandparents still there, or was it just one family unit?
When my mother and father got married, they moved in with Granny and Grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
And Granny and Grandpa they were there till they died, actually.
All in the one house?
Aye.
And how many of a family did your parents have?
I have 4 heirs.
Were there other cottages on the farm at Avisyard?
There's just a ruin. It wouldn't be occupied for a long, long time.
And what sort of outbuildings were there?
Well, there was the dairy buyer and the dairy. There was a tractor shed, a cart shed. I can remember the cart been in there, and a hay shed. And there was a young beast buyer as well, and a separate calf house.
What kind of a farm was it then? Was it
was a dairy farm then.
Dairy farm. And was there any crops as well? Did you grow crops?
Well, in the days they grew corn, corn.
And was that to feed the animals?
Aye. Mm-hmm.
Was it sold on to other farmers, or was it just for your own?
No,
just for your own?
It was to feed.
Any idea how large the herd was?
There was 40 dairy cows.
Were there any other animals on the farm?
No, there wasn't. No.
You didn't keep hens or?
Sorry, I should have remembered. There was hens because we had to feed the hens before we went to the school.
Was there a horse as well?
When I was very young, there was 2 Clydesdale horses.
One was Soldier. Can you remember the other one?
Bobby.
So why did they get rid of the cart horses? Did they move to tractors then, presumably?
That was just, I think Soldier actually died, if I can remember right, but I can remember Bobby being there because my brother and I used to go on his back, bare back, and we would be out in the field and Bobby would get fed up and he would flick his backside and me landed in the ground.
Were any animals allowed in the house?
Well, I can remember we had one time with a Shetland pony and my father brought it into the kitchen. I think it was just to let my mother see it, actually. The collie dog, she was in the kitchen. If I can remember right, I think she slept in the kitchen. I can't think of anything else. No, there was no more animals in the house.
Can you take me through the process of harvesting the hay and the corn?
Well, they would cut the corn with a binder and it made stooks, and the stooks were put out onto the ground and there would be folk there stooking up the corn. I can remember when they brought the stooks in, they were built a certain way onto a trailer and they were brought in and they were forked onto the stack because there was a stackyard with all the corn stacks. And then at threshing time, it was Ramsay and Jackson, it was a big mill that come in. I can just remember that in the air. And the corn there was somebody would fork the corn off the stack onto the mill. And I think it was usually women that was on top of the mill and they cut the strings and fed the mill, fed the sheaves into the mill. And it was threshed that way. And underneath there was the calf. There was always, that's what the chaff. There was this big sheet and somebody gathered that up and took it to the calf house, I would reckon it would be. And that was used for bedding calves. Right. That's all I can really, I can't think of anything else, because as I say, I wasn't very old.
So everybody had to muck in at that point, the children and the people came in.
No, when the big mill came and they were threshing, it was neighbours, it was always men, neighbours came, they all helped each other. I mean, if somebody else was threshing next week, somebody from Avisyard would go there for the day. That's just the way it worked. And I can remember the big table was set, and they all come in and they get their dinner, and then they get their tea in the afternoon, and I think it was quite a social occasion at meal times. And at hay time, the hay was cut with the reaper, and then it would be, well, you needed good weather, it needed to be turned and dried and all the rest of it. And we had a rucking machine, and it was something that the tractor pulled, and it lifted the hay and it went up the elevator into this into a cage, and there was always somebody in the cage to kind of tramp it down. And then when the cage was full, it turned right over upside down, and the doors of the cage were opened, and you had a hyrack. And then later on, well, it was the baler.
Right.
Nobody had hyracks. It was the baler that come along, and it was baled, because I can remember our job was usually to put the bales onto the elevator in the hay shed, and there'd be somebody up in the top building the bales in.
It sounds quite a lot of machinery and people in cages and on tops of things. Is it not a bit dangerous? Did accidents happen? Are you aware?
I never knew of any accidents happening, actually. Did you see I've got a photo of the rocking machine with the cage, but it's no offer clear.
Did you drive the tractor at all? Or?
Well, I didn't drive the tractor very much. The very first time I was driving a tractor and trailer, I hit the gate post, and, well, I didn't drive tractors very much.
Can you remember any extreme weather?
I remember when we were at the school, I mean, we get severe winters, proper snow. I can remember the snow being up the height of the Stane Dykes, and we used to walk along the top of the Stane Dykes, and we were snowed in, because our Roden was about 3/4 of a mile, and we couldn't get to the school. And I mean, when the road used to block, and there was no diggers in the days, I mean, it was a shovel I had to get out with. There was a brae right in front of the house, and that brae always filled up, and they had to go out with shovels, and then they would scatter ashes on it to give the car a grip when it come up the road.
Talking of school, how did you get to school normally? Did you walk, or was there a bus? Or?
Well, the post van took us to the Roden. The post van took us to the Roden. There was a school bus, and then when we come back at night, if it happened to be raining and my dad wasn't there, somebody would come down with a tractor and trailer so that we didn't get wet.
Did any of your family move away out of the area?
No, they more or less stayed in the area.
Did you ever have any tinkers or vagrants staying in the farm? Did they come in, or seasonal workers, that kind of thing?
No, we didn't have any tinkers or vagrants, but we used to get, now this is not politically correct, we used to get the darkies.
Really?
with the suitcase. And there was one day when we were walking up the road for the school, this car stopped, and this man was going to begin as a lift. Well, I looked, and all I could see was his black face, and I can remember I says no thanks, and I bolted. And by the time I got to the door, I was in tears. But my sister Ruth, she got into the car and she got a lift.
And it was somebody working on the farm?
No, it was somebody. No, it was a coloured person to get them from time to time coming round with their suitcase selling stuff.
Yeah. It would be an unusual sight, mind you, at the time.
Because you never. That was the first time you'd ever seen somebody that was coloured. I mean, it gives you a wee fright.
In the farm generally, I was wondering about the sort of allocation of jobs. Did women have a specific role and men to do different jobs?
Well, in the farms in the days, most of the wives actually milked. They went to the milking, because my mother did. Because when we were, I can't remember what age we were, but we had to make our own breakfast because my mother was at the byre. And then there was the dairy dishes, or the milk dishes had to be washed. And it was usually the women that did that as well. But when I left the school, that's what I did.
You didn't have a dairy maid or at that time, it was just the family that did all the jobs?
When we were quite young, there was quite a lot of different maids came and went. Usually they would steal something and they would get down the road. But I think in the days, most firms would have a maid that lived in, and it was usually maybe a lassie that came out of home.
And would there be a buyer man as well?
Well, we had somebody, it was all Sanny, it wasn't all then, but he came in 1930 with my grandpa, and he stayed, and he actually retired 2 or 3 different times to stay with relatives, and he was used to staying in the countryside. He thought everybody in the town was looking in the window, and he landed back 2 or 3 different times, and he actually stayed there, and that was where he died. He just never went away. Just like one of the family.
Okay, so he was in the main house. He wasn't in a...
Well, when you went in the back door, just to your right was the bothy. There was a room there. When that was where he slept. But I mean, he ate with us and he sat with us, and it was him that did the jigsaws and played the dominoes with us. I mean, he was absolutely great. He was like a grandpa. He was about 86 when he died.
Now, I know you got a job as a milk recorder. Can you tell us a bit about what a milk recorder does and how old you were, that kind of thing?
Well, I think I was 18 when I went. And, well, what you actually do is you went to you had a circuit of farms. That was so many farms. And you went in the afternoon, and each cow's milk had to be weighed night and morning. And you took a sample and it went into a wee bottle. And then you had a buyer's sheet where everything was written up. And there was a milk records book as well. But in the days, the milk recorder actually tested the milk for the butterfat. We had a box with a centrifuge, which it was fixed onto a table in the dairy. And there was all these test tubes. And we carried a big bottle of sulphuric acid, a bottle of alcohol, and of course your glass pipette. And in the morning, you had to soak up this. And the first time you use the sulphuric acid, you get it in your lips and the skin peels off. That doesn't happen again. You don't do that again. It was all calibrated, and there was a certain amount of sulphuric acid, a certain amount of alcohol went into your milk sample. And then it went into, it had a locking, they had all locking caps, went into the centrifuge, and there was a handle, and you had to claw this handle and claw it really hard. And then when it stopped and you opened your bottles, all these bottles were calibrated, and you could read what your butterfat was, and it was all written down and calculated. And then eventually it was the milk recorder didn't test the milk on the farm. Latterly, well, nowadays they just take the sample and it's all sent away. Right. And everything, and they don't do the writing up, everything's done with a computer. And all the milk, in the days when I was milk recording, all the milk it was weighed. You had a spring balance thing, and you hooked your cano into that, and you could read what weight was in your milk. I mean, it was actually quite heavy when you went to some of the heavy yielding places.
So it sounds quite technical as well. And did you need qualifications for that? Sciences?
I think I had 2 weeks training in air. That was all. And then you were sent out along with a qualified milk recorder. I think I was maybe with somebody for a week, and then after your week's up, you ken what you're supposed to ken what you're about.
And how often did you have to visit the farm then?
Once a month.
And you needed a car to get there?
In their days, the farmer shifted you from farm to farm. Some folk had vans, but I never had a van. It was the farmer that took you to the next place.
And you stayed overnight?
You stayed overnight, aye.
That sounds a little bit dodgy.
They were all very nice. There was one occasion when somebody tried to get into my bed, I'll be quite honest with you.
Were you able to report that, or what happened?
I didn't, I got a transfer, anybody. I just got a transfer.
You didn't tell your mother or anything, I don't suppose?
Nobody, absolutely nobody.
I was wondering about holidays. Did farmers ever get holidays, or did you go and visit relations or anything like that?
They didn't have holidays. Yeah. I mean, when I was at school, I had an auntie and uncle that had a sheep farm, and that was where all my holidays were spent. You didn't have holidays as such, and my mother and father never had a holiday.
What about social life? I mean, how far away was your farm from the nearest farm?
About 15 minutes walk across the fields.
I presume you joined things like the Young Farmers, or is that how you had a social life?
And you went to Young Farmers dances. Mm-hmm.
And farmers generally married farmers, so you married a farmer. Was that expected? Would that have caused problems if you'd wanted to marry somebody that wasn't a farmer, do you think? Was it expected, or was there not any opportunity to meet anybody from a different circle?
You just tended to go to Young Farmers dances, and you didn't meet anybody else.
Got down shows and competitions. Was there any shows cattle shows, I presume, you would maybe enter competitions like that?
Never entered a competition ever. Air show was the kind of highlight of the year. Everybody went to air show, and you always dressed yourself in. We wore a hat. A hat.
Was this about June? Was that right? Is the air show in June?
May time, because there was a lot of very cold air shows.
What about the Royal Highland show at Ingliston? Did you go to that?
No, when I was young, I didn't. No.
Okay, what was the best thing about living on a farm, do you think?
Okay. Honestly, I couldn't even.
You probably didn't think.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what the best thing was.
Did you like being on a farm as a child? Were you jealous of your friends that lived in town, or did you never think about it?
I can remember when I was at the school, lassies talking about going to the brownies, and on a Friday night there was a hop, Cumnock, and I can remember saying, could I go to the hop? And I was told, aye, I'll hop you. They weren't allowed. Okay. No, absolutely nothing.
What was the worst thing about a farm, being in a farm?
Probably getting up early in the morning, because if you were out late at night, it didn't matter what time you went to your bed. When my father shouted in the morning, you didn't wait 5 minutes, you were out your bed, regardless.
I think that's actually all my questions, Morag. Have you got anything else you would like to add?
I don't think so. No, I can't think of anything.
That was really interesting, Morag. Thank you very much for sharing all these with us.